The flight never got off the ground. A weather delay that turned into a crew timeout, which turned into me walking through the front door in steel-toe boots at 1:54 a.m. The house smelled like vanilla candles and bath steam, the kind of staged domestic piece you'd see in a catalog, and it would have sold better if the sink hadn't been holding 2 wine glasses like a crime scene waiting for a clipboard. One stem had a burgundy half-moon print, too dark for Tessa, who wears coral when she bothers with lipstick at all, while the other was fogged with a wide smear that didn't match the way she sips anything. You spend your life managing job sites and you start reading details the way other men read box scores. Tolerances matter, and tonight the tolerances were off. Upstairs, the shower tiles kept bleeding warmth, a damp line creeping along the grout. The guest towels that should have been folded on the shelf lay collapsed on the floor in a shape that telegraphed hurry, not hospitality. On my nightstand sat a bottle of Armani Code that didn't come from my side of the mirror. It didn't sit there by accident either. It sat the way a rookie contractor leaves a level on a beam to look busy, bold as brass and twice as stupid. The phone buzzed in my pocket. "Wine and bath, early bed," Tessa texted, adding a heart she saves for apologies and sales pitches. I took a screenshot and filed it into a new folder I named Evidence. Then locked the screen and listened to the quiet. You can let your pulse run a crew meeting or you can run it yourself. I went downstairs, poured the sink, and watched the wine thread the drain. Then rinsed the glass with the lipstick last and set it to dry far from the other. No shouting, no questions, no speech about respect. I've seen men lose their jobs and their marriages on the same night because they mistook volume for control. Control is a list and a clock and a plan that doesn't depend on anyone else's good behavior. The basement workshop is where I think straight. The pegboard on the wall carries the kind of order most people only pretend to live by. Impact driver at 12 o'clock, hex sets nested, spares boxed and labeled. On the bench, the last 6 months lined up in my head like joists. The girls' nights that started after the new trainer at Powerflex. The surprise hotel charges at Lakeside and Harborview that she said were client comps. The new gym routine that came with a strange glow and a more expensive shampoo. Each piece alone was explainable. Together they made a loud path I couldn't ignore. I opened a legal pad and wrote phases in block letters at the top. The trick with demolition is not to swing first. It's to trace the wiring before you touch a wall, because nothing humbles a man faster than turning his house dark by his own hand. Phase 1 would be intelligence gathering, no heroics. Passwords, receipts, calendars, text caches. Phase 2 would be financial lockdown. Banks, insurance, titles, anything that could be siphoned or sold off while I was being lectured about understanding. Phase 3 would be leverage. Confronting the weak link, not for justice but for advantage. Phase 4 would be the papers, because in this state fault still shapes outcomes if you can show it with dates and signatures. At 2:40 a.m., I walked through the house like a punch list. The laundry hamper hid a men's t-shirt not cut for me. The trash had a cork from a bottle I didn't buy, pulled with a waiter's corkscrew we don't own. The sliding doors track showed grit and a faint streak, like someone had gone out to the deck barefoot and back fast. People think cheating looks like a movie scene, all candles and silk. Most of the time it looks like carelessness that can't imagine a man taking inventory. I opened my laptop at the workbench, synced the household files, and checked the cloud share she thinks I don't use because she calls it your nerd thing. A new folder tagged Open Houses sat there with generic addresses and PDFs that didn't match her client list. I didn't open it. Not yet. Document first, react second. I photographed the nightstand, the sink, the towels, and the cork, geotag on, timestamp clear, each image labeled with a code the same way I label beam pulls and inspection photos. If a judge ever saw them, they'd see a man who built his case like he builds anything else, plumb, level, and square. By 3, the anger had settled into its shape, the way concrete sets after you've floated the surface and walked away. It wasn't on fire anymore. It was heavy. Weight you could work under if you knew where to put your hands. I wrote the first tasks under Phase 1. Verify passwords. Map her calendar to hotel receipts. Check gym autopay for add-ons. Look for a second device. Confirm the trainer's full name. I added call Tom, county records, because every city has a Tom who knows which stones roll over easily if you ask the right way. I went back upstairs and stood in the doorway. Tessa slept on her side, hair fanned, the kind of picture that would make a weaker man remember anniversaries and forget facts. I looked at the screen of my phone again, at her heart, and thought about the men I've fired for cutting corners and smiling through it. They always say the right words after they get caught. It's their math that convicts them. Evidence doesn't lie, people do. By 4, the phases sat clean on the pad: intelligence, financial, leverage, papers. I capped the pen, killed the lights in the workshop, and let the floor joists carry me back to the bedroom. A storm rattled somewhere inland, the air pressure shifting the way a building breathes when weather leans on it. I set my alarm for 6, stretched out on top of the comforter in my work clothes, and let the plan hold me up. Morning would come, and with it the first measurements. I didn't need a confession. I needed proof. And by the time I was done, I'd have more than enough of it. By the time the sun broke through the blinds, I already knew what the day required. Play sick, stay home, and put her own order against her. Tessa's calendar on the kitchen counter was color-coded to death. Clients in blue, showings in yellow, errands in green. She'd never notice if one more square in red, husband sick, sat like a warning light at the top of the page. When her Mercedes pulled out of the driveway at 8:15 sharp, I let the garage door close all the way before I moved. The boots stayed by the door, quiet feet for quiet work. Her office upstairs looked like a shrine to efficiency, but efficiency works both ways. Receipts stacked in folders, each neatly labeled. Lakeside Inn, Harbor View, spa weekends. Most were billed under her business card, but spa dawns in pairs, romantic weekend codes on invoices, and cash tips logged in her slanted cursive didn't match the story she fed me. Every date synced with late showings in that calendar. The colors that used to reassure me now looked like a trail of breadcrumbs left by someone who thought I'd never bother to follow. On her laptop, auto-saved passwords opened the rest. 32 emails from Ben Carter, her trainer. His messages were full of amateur poetry about her glow, her laugh, how she needed a real man instead of the robot who paid the mortgage. I copied everything, emails, receipts, and screenshots, into a folder on an encrypted drive, double-backed it to a cloud I controlled, and printed hard copies to lock in my shop cabinet. A project manager doesn't bet on one power line. You always run a generator and a backup. Then came the jewelry box. Hidden beneath bracelets was a burner phone, cheap plastic trying to be discreet. I mirrored its contents with a cable and a software kit I'd once used for site inspections. Text threads stretched for months. Hotel room numbers, best night yet. He suspects nothing. One video, shaky and smug, showed Ben holding a wine glass in our bedroom, the same burgundy stain on his lip. Proof doesn't get more concrete. I duplicated everything twice, encrypted it, and returned the phone to its velvet cradle as if nothing had shifted. By noon, the folder labeled evidence had grown fat. I closed it, shut down her laptop, and lay in bed with a warm forehead cloth just as the garage rumbled again. Tessa walked in carrying deli soup, wearing her sympathy like perfume. She set the bowl down, pressed a kiss to my forehead, and whispered, "You'll feel better soon." I muttered a cough and pulled the blanket higher, watching her silhouette in the doorway like a stage actress who didn't know the audience had already seen behind the curtain. Every move I'd made was quiet, deliberate. Not a single confrontation, not a single raised voice. Just measurements, double-checked and squared. By the time her heels clicked down the hall, I wasn't her sick husband anymore. I was the man drafting the blueprints for her collapse. By the third day of silence, I needed eyes on him. Paper trails can tell you how someone cheats. Watching tells you why. Powerflex Gym sat in the corner of the strip mall between a smoothie bar and a vape shop, the kind of place that sells middle-aged desperation for $60 a month. I signed up, cash, no fuss. Ben Carter was easy to spot, 6'2", bleach tips, the kind of tan you buy in a booth. He carried himself like a man who believed sweat counted as character. His routine wasn't weights or cardio. It was orbit. He drifted around treadmills, adjusting form on women with rings still on their fingers, hands lingering on hips, jokes sliding toward private invitations. I watched from the squat rack, pretending to care about reps while his choreography played out. The same touch on the lower back, The same exaggerated laugh. A salesman with no product but himself. In the locker room, I tested the waters. I sat near him, laced my boots slowly, and dropped my wife's name like a hammer wrapped in velvet. Tessa's been talking about switching up her routine. Have you ever worked with her? His poker face cracked just enough to show the cards. Lips pressed too tight, then a shrug. Maybe. I've got a lot of clients. That sliver was all I needed. Observation is one thing, pressure another. That afternoon I called in a favor. Tom Jenkins at the county clerk's office owed me for a weekend I'd covered when his deck collapsed. By sundown, I had a file on Carter. Overdue rent, a DUI 6 months fresh, 2 credit cards circling the drain. A man like that doesn't bend under morality. He bends under weight. The next lever was subtler. I walked into the manager's office. Lisa, 40-something, sharp eyes, and raised a complaint. Not angry, not dramatic, just factual. Your trainer's a little handsy. Married clients, me included, might not appreciate it. Polite tone, steady eye contact. She nodded, filed a note, thanked me. Nothing official, but enough to make her hover. By the time Carter hit the mats next session, Lisa was watching from 10 feet away, and the swagger had a hitch in it. That night, Tessa texted me out of the blue. Thinking of switching gyms. Powerflex feels crowded lately. I typed back, whatever makes you comfortable, babe, and set the phone down with a quiet smile. In the workshop later, I marked a small check on the pad. Phase 1 wasn't just about collecting receipts anymore. It was about teaching the other side that I was in the room, even if they couldn't see me. A good predator doesn't pounce. He narrows the field until the prey runs straight into the snare. You don't chase liars where they roam free. You catch them where they think the walls protect them. For Tessa and Ben, that place was the Lakeside Inn, the kind of mid-tier hotel that pretends to be discreet because the curtains are heavy and the clerks don't ask questions. Danny Parker was on shift that Friday. I knew him from a drywall job his brother had screwed up years back, and a 50 slipped under the counter still meant something to him. He leaned close and whispered, "Room 247. Fridays. Cash every time. No hesitation, no suspicion. Just a man paid to forget faces." I staked out in my truck across from the lobby, a thermos of black coffee keeping me anchored. At 2:19 p.m., the Mercedes rolled in. She was laughing before she even closed the door, hair pulled back casual, like she'd rehearsed carefree in the mirror. Ben followed, trying to look invisible in a hoodie too tight for his shoulders. They moved fast, heads down, up the stairs. I followed 10 minutes later, phone recorder on, and held it steady against the frame of 247. Their laughter leaked through the wood, her high, brittle giggle, his grunt of satisfaction, the creak of a mattress I paid for in more ways than one. I didn't stay long. Evidence is weight. Too much and it cracks the beam you're standing on. I walked back out calm, no one giving me a second glance, and by the time I sat behind the wheel again my pulse was steady. Later, when the door opened, I filmed from the lot. She kissed him like a teenager who thinks the world is blind, fingers clutching his hoodie like she'd drown without it. He cupped her chin, smug, the kind of move a man uses when he thinks he's taken something permanent. I zoomed in, held steady, and clicked stills while the video rolled. The file names wrote themselves: 247_audio, 247_exit, 247_kiss. At dinner that night, she floated around the kitchen with a glow that didn't belong to me. She served pasta, smiled too much, kissed me on the cheek like she'd remembered marriage in a dream. Upstairs, while she bathed, her phone buzzed. Smug little messages lit the screen. "E suspects nothing." His reply, "Boring robot." I saved them, filed them, and shut her phone back down before the tub drained. The pad in the workshop had another checkmark before midnight. Fasteners set. Load path clear. The house was still standing, but not for long. Some men fight with fists. Others fight with lawyers. I've spent my life fighting with leverage. Weight applied at the right point until the beam shifts or snaps. Ben Carter was no different from a bow joist. You just had to find the spot that would break him. Starbucks on Main made for an easy trap. Wide windows, too much noise to eavesdrop, and a steady stream of nobodies who never looked twice. I parked across the street, watched him stumble in, hungover swagger dulled into twitchy nerves. He ordered a venti, something he couldn't afford, and scrolled his phone with the careless posture of a man who thinks no one is hunting him. I walked straight over, steel-toe boots clicking on tile, and slid into the chair across from him like an inspector who'd just found black mold. He froze mid-sip. I set my phone on the table, screen bright with stills. Him and Tessa leaving room 247. Their lips tangled, her hand on his chest like she was showing off a prize. His jaw flexed, but no words came. "Let's skip the lies," I said. "You've got dead up to your bleached hair, a fresh DUI, and a file of married clients who wouldn't appreciate screenshots of your inbox. Passcode 1234, real creative." His eyes widened. He'd left his phone face up, and I'd already mirrored it days ago. 12 other women, all with rings, all with messages that read like confessions. I scrolled a few names, just enough for him to see the ruin in real time. "Here are your options," I said, voice steady, low enough to sound like law. "You block her, you leave town tonight, and you never touch another married woman in this city. Or I walk every file, your boss, your landlord, your probation officer, and the court of public opinion. By Monday, you'll be radioactive." He tried to speak, but words died in his throat. I leaned closer. "You're not her fantasy, Carter. You're her mistake. And mistakes get corrected." He left his coffee untouched, hands shaking as he stuffed papers into a backpack like he could outrun the evidence. By 10 that night, I watched from the corner of Maple and Vine as his battered Mustang rattled out of town, trunk tied down with bungee cords, exhaust coughing like a smoker. Tessa's texts came in waves over the next hour. "Where are you? Why aren't you answering? This isn't funny." Each one more frantic, like watching a building collapse in slow motion after the load-bearing walls have been cut. I didn't answer. I just logged the messages, filed them under Ben Collapse, and drew a thick black line across phase 3 on the yellow pad. Controlled demolition complete. Grief makes people sloppy. Tessa walked through the house like a widow, except the man she mourned was still alive and driving west in a Mustang held together by rust and denial. Her routine sagged: wine at 4, empty plates at 6, half-hearted excuses about headaches. She thought she was hiding pain. What she didn't realize was that pain makes thieves careless. Danny Parker called me 3 days after Carter vanished. Said he'd seen them leave something behind in room 247. He didn't want trouble, but the way he said it told me he already had some. $100 and a handshake convinced him I was only after closure. That's how I found myself standing in the same stale-smelling bathroom where they'd laughed about me like I was a punchline. The vanity had a false bottom, thin as drywall, tape frayed at the corners. I peeled it back and pulled free a flash drive no bigger than my thumb, dust clinging like it had waited months for someone who knew where to look. I pocketed it, left the tape exactly how I'd found it, and nodded at Danny on my way out. Back home, I plugged it into a laptop in the workshop, fan humming like a jury about to deliver a verdict. 6 hours of videos filled the screen. Cheap motel angles, their faces too close, their voices too certain. They talked about me like a problem they'd already solved. "He never checks statements. We'll be gone before he even notices." That's when she said it, Tessa, her voice like she was bragging to a sorority sister. "I've skimmed almost 30 grand already. He's clueless." I didn't blink. I just hit pause and wrote the number down. 30,000. Dates, transfers, account trails I'd cross-reference by morning. I copied the entire drive to 2 encrypted folders, burned another onto a DVD, and hid it in a lockbox under my drill bits. The original went back into the same slot under the vanity 2 hours later. Tape pressed flat, fingerprints wiped. If she or Carter ever came sniffing, they'd never know I'd seen their confessions. When I finally sat at the bench again, it wasn't anger that settled over me. It was clear. For months, I'd lived with doubt, with the gnawing possibility that I was imagining things. Now the structure was complete. Infidelity, contempt, theft. A load-bearing betrayal I could present to any judge, any banker, any broker. I closed the laptop, locked the box, and exhaled for the first time in weeks. It didn't hurt less. It just stopped being uncertain. And a man can build on certainty even when the ground is scorched. When you know the foundation's cracked, the first step isn't screaming at the architect. It's shoring up the frame before the whole structure caves in. Tessa thought Sacramento was Portland, a design conference she'd fabricated down to fake itineraries. I drove her to the airport myself, kissed her cheek like any dutiful husband, and watched the GPS on her phone land 2 states off. That gave me a window, and I intended to use every damn minute. First stop, the bank. Patricia Lopez had seen me through mortgages, payroll accounts, and the lean years when I lived on black coffee and overtime. She didn't ask questions when I laid 30 grand in siphoned funds on the counter with timestamps and transfers. We need to freeze all joint access today, I told her. Flag withdrawals, flag wire transfers, no exceptions. She clicked keys, nodded once, and gave me the paperwork that made it official. From there, I called our insurer. Tessa had hinted at opening new policies. I wasn't about to let her leverage our names for cash-outs. Flag her activity, I said. Anything big. I want a call before approval. They agreed. Then I met with Carol Brooks, our broker. Over coffee, I asked her to cut Tessa's client load for her mental health. Code words that meant one thing. Less commission, less leverage, less cash flow for her side projects. The last stop was Dave Patterson, attorney. Old school, flannel under his blazer, handshake like a vice. I laid the evidence in neat order: hotel receipts, emails, texts, the $30,000 trail. I want legal separation and asset holds filed by week's end, I told him. She's siphoning money, she's committing fraud, and she doesn't know I know. Use that window. He grunted approval. We'll lock it down before she even lands. By day 10, the pipes were capped. Joint accounts frozen. Titles protected. Insurance flagged. Broker throttling the flow. Divorce prep filed in triplicate. Back at the house, the kitchen table looked like a construction trailer mid-project. Blueprints of a marriage reduced to folders, contracts, affidavits stacked square and true. When Tessa called from her hotel in Sacramento to ask if I'd eaten, I told her yes. My voice didn't tremble. She laughed, said she missed me, and promised we'd work on us when she got back. I hung up, circled phase 2 on the yellow pad, and underlined it twice. The storm was coming, but the site was secure. She could waltz through the door in my sweatshirt, humming about fresh starts, but the house she left was not the house she'd returned to. She came back on a Tuesday night, suitcase rolling behind her, humming like someone who just rediscovered innocence. Tessa wore my old college sweatshirt, sleeves tugged over her hands like a flag of truce. For a second, a weaker man might have believed it. That smile, the soft voice, the way she touched my arm in the kitchen like nothing had shifted. But the documents were already laid out on the table beside a bottle of Pinot, labels neat, signatures flagged. A construction site waiting for the final inspection. I didn't start with accusations. I started with names. Ben Carter, Lakeside Inn, room 247. Each word was a nail-driven steady. Her face twitched, lips tightening, hands twisting the sleeve cuffs. I slid my laptop across the table, pressed play. A few minutes of their own laughter, their own words, suspects nothing, broke the robot, and she bragged about siphoning 30 grand. Then I closed the lid. Silence filled the house like drywall dust after a sledgehammer. Michigan's fault framework, I said, voice level. Adultery and financial fraud. Add in the quitclaim deed you signed for tax purposes 3 years back, and the house isn't a debate. Neither are the accounts. She cycled through the whole script. Denial first, then fury, then bargaining. At one point she reached for the wine like it might anchor her. We can fix this, she whispered. It was just a mistake. I shook my head. Mistakes don't have room numbers. Mistakes don't siphon 30 grand. When the bargaining ran dry, she hit logistics, what she could take, how fast she needed to move, what she could keep quiet. I gave her 3 days. Clothing, jewelry, the Civic in the garage. Nothing else. By Thursday, the suitcases were gone. The door slammed with a finality that rattled the frames, and for the first time in months the house felt plumb and level again. The weight lifted. the air steady. I poured a glass of water, sat at the same kitchen table, and marked a bold X across phase 4. The demolition was finished. Now comes the rebuild. Divorce isn't a sprint. It's a slow grind of filings, hearings, and strategies designed to bleed you dry. Her attorney, William Hartman, tried every play in the book. Delay motions, smear campaigns, whispers about me being controlling, even an accusation that I'd planted evidence. Dave Patterson didn't flinch. He laid out receipts, bank statements, time-stamped hotel bills. He didn't need the videos. The money trail alone was enough to sink her case. Judges don't care about whispers when the numbers line up in black and white. 8 months later, the gavel came down. The verdict was clean. She walked with clothing, jewelry, and the old Civic that coughed smoke every third mile. I kept the Maple Street house I'd swung hammers to pay for, the retirement accounts, and a future no longer chained to her deceit. The quitclaim deed, the siphoned 30 grand, and her own arrogance had done most of the work for me. After court, she didn't look at me. She just signed the last page, shoved the pen across the table, and left with Hartman trailing behind, briefcase snapping shut like a coffin lid. I didn't follow. There was nothing left to chase. 2 years later, my phone rang. Jake Miller, an old buddy, spoke with the kind of tone men use when delivering bad news that isn't really bad. "You heard about Carter?" he asked. "High-speed crash out west. Drunk, gambling debts, and some jealous husband in the mix. Didn't walk away." I thanked him, hung up, and stepped onto the porch. Lake Huron breathed steady in the distance, waves rolling like they always had, uncaring, unbroken. I sat there a long while, thinking about gravity, the way every structure collapses when the load paths are ignored. Tessa and Ben had built their secret house of cards, and it had folded right on schedule. I wasn't glad he was dead, and I wasn't sorry either. Karma's just another word for gravity. You can't cheat balance. You can't skip inspection. Ignore the weight long enough and the whole damn frame comes down. I raised a glass of water to the horizon and let the quiet settle. My house stood straight, my accounts were secure, and the storm had passed. What came next would be built my way, plumb, level, and true.
Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.